You are watching Hearthstone Grandmasters, and this is the Asia Pacific region. First region of the day, of course, Europe and Americas follow shortly afterwards. We've got a full suite of 5 games to be played out today here in Asia Pacific, and great ones they will be indeed. Because right out of the gate, we're getting to see one of the players who had one of the most devastating stories of the first 3 weeks of Grandmasters right out of the gate. Posesi on Sunday last week, I'm going to be honest, was looking pretty good for Division A in the majority of the instances. I think 7 of the 8 possibilities with how things worked out roughly. He was guaranteed to be Division A, but it turns out the nightmare run happened where he was put through to Division B, and both Dawn and Blitzchung earned their spot in Division A ahead of
And Dawn ending Posesi's hopes at Division A is somewhat poetic because now Posesi's first opponent in Division B is Dawn's teammate and best friend in Flurry. So right out the gate, I feel like Posesi wants to get a little bit of revenge. If anybody follows
them.
Posesi on Twitter, you will know just how frustrated he was watching the end of last week pan out. However, something that's not surprising is that we have Mutual Warrior Band. Very much feels like we're back in reality now that we're out of the specialist format.
Could not agree more. I think it's definitely the way to go. We'll get into things when Priest comes into play, because that is when I think things get a little bit more complicated. But if you are bringing Tempo Mage in particular, the kind of Miracle Secret Rogue as well, all of these decks just feel fairly vulnerable to Bomb Warrior because it has such great defensive capabilities. It punishes decks that draw a lot of cards as well over the course of the game due to all the bombs that are being shuffled in there. So let's just get that out of the way. And then afterwards, we are left with the only difference that I'm seeing in terms of the overall archetype being Zoo for Posesi, a somewhat interesting modern build of Zoo as well against the Druid. Flurry.
Yes, indeed. Modern build meaning that it has a little bit more of the full fragment package. Zoo's always had Spirit Jailer for a while, but now there's also running Soulshare, that has 1 copy of them, and the double Shadow Scholars to perhaps take the slot of where Neferson Thrasher used to be and just try to get a little bit more removal package in there. Remains to be seen whether that's the best Zoo build. We'll definitely see different tech across the other people bringing Zoo. But as for Flurry, the bring of Druid is definitely looking to be one of the older builds. Malagos Druid probably only having its heyday during Specialist, as most people are back on the Survival of the Fittest version.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of Mali knocking about, but I definitely agree with you for the most part that if you're going to bring Druid, this feels like the way to go for me. I think double Broomstick with a Thrasher build feels very well suited to this current metagame, where we're having a fair few aggro decks knocking about, or at least tempo decks, I should say, with a lot of Rogue and Mage in there. And so Thrasher and the Broomstick to combo with that feels very, very powerful, in my opinion, being able to sweep off all those wide boards that Druid has no real business clearing off, in my opinion. And it's going to be doing so for a long time, as I think Druid is one of the surprise classes to not be hit with the upcoming wave of nerfs to hit us on Tuesday, I believe. But even having said that, it's still not an especially represented class, and I think it's found itself a bit of a tough matchup to get things rolling against the Zoo.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, Derek. I was going to say that aside from these two classes, we have a mirror. So overall, if we're going to see who's favored in terms of the entire matchup, we'd have to look at this specific Warrior versus Druid matchup. And that, I believe, is definitely in Posesi's favor because Zoo can just explode onto the board while Druid is still ramping. And they can put down enough threats that even getting down Guardian Animals can't necessarily answer the entire board at once.
Decent little bit of ramp, though, to get things going for Flurry, with Wild Growth, of course, coming down on turn 2. This option, though, is kind of interesting because Broomstick is currently the only minion in hand, so Crystal Song Portal is very possibly going to become active in the next few turns.
It could be. Not that you want to tempo out the Broomstick, but the other options like Termination is hardly ever going to get value.
That's true.
And the Forest Aid was too far off from being played, so I would agree with the Crystal Song here.
Posesi holding off on the Cult Neophyte here as well. It's a pretty crucial card in the matchup, I think it's fair to say.
It is, and the timing of it is very possibly what he had in mind here. Locking out Wild Growth was a possibility the last turn, but this turn I think you can have a more solid read on Overgrowth coming out.
I think for the most part, I like the tap there as well. A lot of the time, you want to play Tour Guide and then leave the 0-mana hero power for some synergies thereafter. But with a Flesh Giant in hand, I think he's just looking at tapping every single turn where possible in order to make that a possibility.
Yeah, that's right. Without having hit the Dark Lair, there's not that much incentive for holding on to the free hero power. Same thing without the Vulture in hand. So I think Posesi's main priority will indeed be that Flesh Giant, or at least tap to get the Expired Merchant or Nightshade Mage combo with this hand of.
So this turn wasn't necessarily a zero tempo play as well from Flurry. We could have seen Lightning Bloom Lake Thrasher just to get something on the board. But again, this is the point of Broomstick, right? You hold back and then you explode onto the board, and you should generally be able to wrestle things back in your control.
Completely agreed, but with this Nightshade Mage drawn off the top for Posesi, that's a minion that's out of range of a simple Lake Thrasher attack. Posesi also positioning so that his high attack minions are next to each other, not getting super punished if Lake Thrasher does indeed come down this turn. Man, this is so much damage staring Flurry down. It's already 12 and he's at 17, so he's dead to Soulfire plus 1 damage and potentially double Soulfire, which Posesi does have in hand.
It's great positioning as well from Posesi. Putting the Matron in the middle there just makes it so Lake Thrasher has to tank way more damage in order to be able to clear off both of the big threats.
Well, Flurry can do the big thing with Lightning Bloom into Ironbark plus coin the Broomstick, which will get rid of the entire board, but this is so expensive. Flurry's next turn is looking very dead.
It's looking very, very dead. This is a desperation play of the highest order on this turn.
And he could choose to actually leave up the Flame Imp if he wants to preserve a little bit of health on the Thresher, but I think that's a little bit too risky. You already committed Ironbark this trade. Oh, okay. Gonna go for it. My thinking was, if that was gonna be the play, you probably just trade the Broomstick into the Matron, but you don't end up with a taunt. But he would have had Lightning Bloom in hand.
And then he would have tanked 3 more damage. Yeah, I agree. That play felt a little bit weird because now it was a 9 health minion, and so it would have gone down to 4, but the board would have been cleared. Whereas now it tanks the Flame Imp and it's at less health anyway, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit fishy. Maybe Flurry changed his mind at the last moment, but it doesn't mean that he has 0 outs. Top deck of Innervate or Second Lightning Bloom could give him a turn to do, but for now, Posesi is still in the driver's seat.
He did, however, get, what is that, Professor Slate? That gives poisonous to all of his spells, so Soulfire there is able to cleanly deal with the big Lake Thrasher. That was the real thing that Flurry should have played around there, of course, was poisonous Soulfire.
And with nothing but a hero power to do, Posesi has full initiative on this board. Not quite lethal yet, but... Oh wait, it is with the Shadow Light.
Yeah.
That one can go face.
That one can go face. Doesn't have poisonous, unfortunately, when targeting the face, but still a very powerful play from Posesi. And I think I really like that you spotted there from Flurry that was the turn, right? That was where things had to turn around. It was the Broomstick Thresher turn in order to swing things back. And to be perfectly honest, it felt like it wasn't handled in the best way because the follow-up was so weak, whereas he could have gone with the line of holding back on the taunt, take 3 extra damage on that turn. It sucks, but it's, I think a worthy sacrifice, because then the turn after, it could have just been the Guardian coming down onto the board, taunting up, really difficult to deal with, and all of a sudden, I think Flurry could potentially have turned that one around.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying that even if he had gone for that line, he would have been playing from behind the entire game because Posesi was so ahead on the resource game, fitting in all those taps at the beginning and getting down the Flesh Giant to a point where it might have overrun Flurry. But still, I would have preferred maybe Flurry to think about the turn a little bit more, but before starting his actions, I think it's fair to say that in the first 3 weeks, Flurry was definitely in the list of players that we thought was not playing at his best. A lot of questionable turns here and there.
Indeed. Again, with this being Conquest, trying to switch over in my mindset again with all the different formats that we've had over the last few weeks. Warlock is out of the way now, which is, I think, a pretty big deal for Posesi. Zoo feels like one of the most contentious decks at the moment. On one hand, it brought Viper to victory last week. On the other hand, some of the players I respect most in the world, like Yala, Huntrace, I hear them calling it a meme fairly frequently and having very little faith in the deck. So, any controversy aside, I'm sure Posesi is glad to get a win with that one so it doesn't let him down all the way. When we come back, we're going to find out if Flurry can turn things around against the likes of Rogue and Mage that Posesi has left. But we are going to go to a short break, and when we come back, the conclusion of the series. You are back and watching Hearthstone Grandmasters, a very, very fast first game to get things rolling. As is always the case with Zoo, it feels like way too fast of a deck for how many decisions we have to analyze along the way. I'm sure there were many different things that could have been explored for Posesi in particular in that game, but does get the win nonetheless. And now, Gia, I think the kind of the bread and butter of what we're going to be seeing this week are the two decks that are remaining. Obviously, the Warrior, the Bomb Warrior, is the most brought archetype, but I believe that will, for the most part, be banned away. And so we're going to be seeing a lot of Tempo Mage and Secret Rogue, which, for me at least, I think are two very, very cool decks.
Yes, they definitely have a lot of flexibility as to how their game plans unfold. But for this particular matchup that we're going to see next, which is the Rogue from Flurry lining up against, the Rogue from Posesi lining up against Flurry's Druid once again,
Mm.
I feel like the Druid is definitely the weak link. This is something that really, really struggles against questing, against Edwin, and the Rogue snowballs so fast.
I must
Yeah,
protect the wild.
It's very much a game of two halves. You can either hit the big start with Questing or Edwin, or you can not hit it. And those are two very, very disparate games. But obviously, Posesi here found the Questing. He's already got what he wants, because Druid, since the dawn of time, I suppose especially since Naturalize was moved to the Hall of Fame, really struggles with hard removal. There's very, very little that it can do to take down the likes of a Questing, especially with double Shadow Step in hand for Posesi. You don't care about the battle cry value from this Blackjack Stunner. That is just a +2/+2 with every Shadow Step.
That's right, and I was wondering if you even just put it down that turn because you don't expect it to get cleared, and then you could coin out Questing and just go off immediately with the Shadow Steps. Probably a little bit risky, because he can just go for the delay one turn play with Ambush first, and you go Questing, coin, Blackjack, and then step it any number of times you like, and there's the small possibility that you get to bounce it.
Flurry, on the other hand, is doing his own pretty disgusting stuff. He got Breath of Dreams discovered, which actually worked. It never works in this deck with only the one dragon, and yet he draws Ysera just in time. But for Posesi on the other side, it's not even just Questing, it's Edwin on this turn.
Yep, this is disgusting on both ends, but I will say that Posesi's turn is a lot wilder. He will run out of value in this hand, and by going all in, the Questings that he does have after this will be significantly weaker, but it probably doesn't matter, because how is Flurry going to deal with this giant Van Cleave?
Have you ever heard, Jira, of the value of punching your opponent in the face? Because it more than makes up for a card disadvantage. As you can clearly see from Flurry's reaction, this one's not looking so hot, it's got to be said.
He's definitely stressed out. But he does have at least Teacher's Pet installed for a bit. He has seen double Shadow Step, so from here on out, the threat of the Blackjack Center should be a lot lower. However, the exact secret that Posesi put down was the one that could answer Teacher's Pet, so Flurry's play of Twilight Runner actually works out for him better.
Yeah, and he knew that after having played a spell on the previous turn that tests for both Dirty Tricks and Plagiarize. So I fully agree, just get a minion that will be able to attack in some form on the following turn. And then I guess pray that when in combination with Overflow, or maybe Teacher's Pet on this turn, for a taunt, it's enough to help you survive.
I think he does have to put down a taunt here, as painful as it is. He can at least go for this Fog Beam to get rid of the ambush minion. But it's a long shot before he can deal with this Van Cleave. I think the play is to go for a taunt here, hero power, and then try to get down the Innervate Ysera Iron Bark on the Ysera for a bit more breathing room the next turn.
It's a real tough one, because if he goes for Ysera, it goes to what, exactly 15 health? Which, you know, it's only buying you a turn. It's an attack with an Edwin and a minion or the dagger.
I mean, maybe that one turn is enough. What he needs is to actually swing the board. So I'm seeing a Dragons plus Overflow game plan, because taunt after taunt, in natural taunts with the Teacher's Pet at least, in my head that doesn't get there. I think what's scary here for Flurry is that this Teacher's Pet is just dead to an Eviscerate plus Trade, and potentially Dagger Phase.
Okay, I'm on board with this, because that's the thing, right? The plan is, as you laid out, Ysera, then the Overflow, and hope to get triple Evasive Draconid or something like that in order to pull this one back.
Worth noting that Posesi's Rogue list is not playing Vendetta, so that was one potential less worry for Flurry to think about when it came to that Teacher's Pet surviving, but he has set this up now that he can potentially get down the Ysera.
He has Ysera, trade, and hit in with the weapon with the Edwin.
Give me a quest.
I mean, it's a pretty simple game plan. The question is just, will it work or won't it? There's not really too many ways that you can go about it here.
Well, the questing coming down for Posesi just to warrant an immediate answer. The Iron Beak Owl will make quick work of it, but I think Posesi would rather have the Miscreant activation instead of a potential growing questing, because Edwin is the main offensive here.
Obviously, Secret is the best draw in the deck to immediately win the game. and that does not work because he won't have mana to play to both activate the One Thief and play a 3-mana Mage spell.
Correct. If only it could discover Rogue Secret. So I do think the Stunner is the activator for both these combo minions instead here, because he's toying with the idea of Miscreant first, but I think this on average is better. Ancient Mysteries draws him a secret, but he's already played the Stunner. And he's played both Shadow Step, so maybe it's just a brain freeze.
Okay.
I was thinking just so he could play it this turn, but I guess he doesn't actually need to, right? You'd rather play a Lackey and then just do the beast.
Yeah. There's no real target. Okay.
Oh, yikes.
I mean, that could be okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's good for Posesi.
Oh, right, okay.
Running out of value.
My default reaction when I see Draconic Lackey is to go yikes, but here it was actually pretty good.
And the other big yikes is if Flurry wants to play this Overflow, it means healing back up the Edwin.
But there's no other line, right?
There's a 2-minion line, and you can fit in the Crystal Power with the Lightning Bloom.
And then next turn you can go draw 7 cards, I suppose, with Overflow and Twilight Runner. Okay.
I think that's probably better than healing back up the Edwin. And then going Crystal Power for healing makes a lot of sense because he's not dead to just a single Edwin punch and dagger now.
Yeah, it's the most likely line to actually let him clear the Edwin as well, which is very, very important.
Okay, so dragons that could potentially win the game on the spot. Evasive Worm, well, not quite win the game on the spot, but it makes the clean trade into Teacher's Pet.
Yeah, and then you can hit them for 18. I mean, there is the ability, aside from a taunt, to hit them for 14 on this turn, and then try and take the win from there.
Just with dagger. So perhaps Big Ol' Whelp Dagger is just more consistent. You definitely don't want to trade the Edwin into a 4-attack minion. Serve it up for a nice clear. Oh, the Pen Flinger!
That's pretty good, right? If he's getting his opponent down to this low health total, a Pen Flinger, Ancient Mysteries, Pen Flinger, 0-mana Secret, Pen Flinger, that starts to stack up pretty quickly.
The one of, but Flurry with the King Mukla has now developed on board just clean trades right away. You can take these trades, summon a bunch of dragons, and with a taunt, and heal back up to 11. Flurry is so in this, Dark.
He's just winning!
Insane. Okay, you can go for Taunt the Mukla value trade Overflow then. Safer line is perhaps taunting the higher health minion. He has seen both of the stunners now.
Yeah.
But 7 health taunt, I think. Oh, sorry, 8 health. Still very, very strong.
Guardian Animals, even Runic Carvings is pretty insane if he just needs a little bit of extra board clear.
How many beasts does he even have left at this point? We saw double Teacher's Pet and Twilight Runner. Well, there's the Threshers in there.
Yeah.
He's not Mali Druid anymore, so the beast package is heavier.
Heal
winning,
as well.
You're right.
He's just won, let alone winning. Penflinger here can do 3 damage to face, I suppose, with the Ancient Mysteries comboing with the 0-mana Secret.
Not the juice. Better choice than to just go for minion development, I suppose. And he is staring down 15 on Flurry's side of the board. Possibility for survival of the fittest, of course, locked out by these neophytes. But it's a very clean 2-turn lethal setup anyway.
Yeah, it is. And Posesi here, playing to the out of Miscreant into double Spell Lackey, Abyss, something like that, that can get there. But as we can clearly see, I think Flurry will take this opportunity to just play out the Healing Touch to lock out any outs whatsoever for Flurry.
Yeah, even if he gives Posesi a healing touch, he can put enough on board so that it would overwrite Posesi's healing anyway, I think. Get the news that it's not plagiarized, and now the turn should be very, very, very straight. How did Flurry pull this back there?
Just Druid things.
14-14 Edwin.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that should just be winning the game right at the start. But it turns out that drawing your teacher's pet, which is usually a terrible thing to happen, was actually just pretty nutty here. And also for Flurry, I will say, the exact line that you and he both spotted of going for taunting up the Ysera, then going for the draw afterwards, even saving the overflow for a turn further than what I was anticipating he should go for, was a very, very clever line to take, and it allowed him to both get the dragons in his deck for the counter-lethal, and also give him the time he needed to kill off Edwin. It was a very well-played game for Druid.
Absolutely, I think Flurry was on form there. It does beg the question of whether Posesi, if we rewind and go back with hindsight and caster vision combined, can we find any room to criticize playing out both the Shadow Steps with Stunner? He could have gone for a 12-12 Edwin instead, by playing both the Shadow Steps but not playing the final Stunner.
Yes, yeah. I think that there are almost certainly ways that you can find to improve with the rogue deck almost all the time, whether it be playing out the questing first and then going for the Edwin there afterwards in order to try and get multiple big minions rather than just one huge minion. I think at that point it was probably the correct way to go for the Edwin, but very possibly later on, like finding some way to get a bigger questing rather than playing them both out for 2/2s. It was a very all-in game plan there from Posesi.
And a lot of the time, all in is just the name of the game for the rogue, so it's very difficult to say whether that was actually wrong or not, but it does mean that Flurry has what I would call the weak link of his lineup out of the way, at least the weak link with regard to what Posesi's decks are, and we're now into a mirror.
And into a pretty spicy starting hand for the mirror at that. I genuinely find in the matchup that the cards I'm looking for are obviously, as in almost every matchup, questing and Edwin, just because that's how the deck functions as a whole. But Hanar is a pretty high priority keep as well, just because of how much value and how much annoyance you can create for your opponent.
Getting it down first is absolutely huge here. Posesi notably holds back this backstab. In terms of what can deal with the Hanar, I don't think the one additional damage from the Pharaoh Cat makes a difference. It's Eviscerate at this spot or like Secret Coin Blackjack, which both of those removal options would be available whether or not the cat was on board. However, Flurry does not have those options in hand, so now he has to see if he's responding to a Hanar with a Hanar.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I think I would have gone for backstab there if purely just to play around backstab from my opponent, which allowed for a clear on the Hanar with the dagger at that point.
That's true.
Is the main thing that I would be afraid of. But there's always value to holding on to these cheap cards in the matchup. As soon as you find, Edwin, Miscreant, Questing, as I keep saying, all these combo cards that get bigger and bigger with more spells you have in hand, it's super important to hold on to those cheap spells a lot of the time as well.
But I really like this from Posesi. Not getting baited by the Secret Train, knowing that he wouldn't actually get that far ahead on board if you just go Dirty Secrets plus, at best case, Noble Sacrifice from Paladin. His Hanar is very likely to still get traded down. So instead, he's playing Cult Neophyte, potentially shutting down Posesi's Secret Train and presenting way more threat on board.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart way to go about it. It shuts down the big pop-off turn as well. And when that does come down, Posesi, of course, now has Devolving Missiles for that kind of hard removal that he needs to clear off a big Edwin, a big Questing that can just skew the matchup in your favor.
Absolutely insane. And what happens here instead is Flurry is just going to take a removal turn, and both players are conceding their Hanars essentially without taking any value from them. Very symmetrical.
Posesi running out of value, of course, at the moment, but that is what the Dirty Tricks should be moving towards fixing. And I think even despite playing the Neophyte on the same turn, which obviously has some kind of inherent anti-synergy, there's no way that Flurry can avoid playing any spells whatsoever in the next 2-3 turns.
secret package from Posesi is double dirty tricks, 1 plagiarize, double ambush. So Posesi is definitely threatening the 2-3 primarily here. Flurry starting off with the Pharaoh Cat gets the news that it is not ambush. So he has to think very carefully about what he actually wants to give Posesi if this is the one plagiarize. And I don't think a Mermy is too much value to concede whatsoever, but you'll get the news now that it is dirty.
Indeed. And while I was, saying at the start that he can not afford to not play any spells over the next few turns, he kind of can. Just avoiding playing spells that turn, Wasteland Assassin next turn is perfectly reasonable as well. And even if he has to play spells afterwards, that's still a couple of awkward turns for Posesi where he hasn't had the extra value that he needed.
Yeah, it's true. And the way you time into plagiarize is if you can get down the big questing on the turn that the plagiarize goes off, then Posesi can't just be responding with the questing of his own. Need to prioritize removing that big threat that Flurry put down first. So we could be seeing Secret Passage put that game plan together for Flurry.
I do really like holding onto the missiles here as well for Posesi. It was a strong play on this turn, you know, removing the reborn effect, potentially giving you something that you can kill off with the dagger if you're fortunate. But there's so much more value that you can potentially obtain if you snipe off a big questing such as this one.
With the 3 mana remaining, Status Up is potentially good. Let's see if there are any cheap ones. This. Oh, nutty!
That's pretty huge. That makes it difficult to clear. Plenty of value being generated, and also a heckin' big questing as well.
Yep. Flurry gets to play a ton of resources, which he will give Posesi, but he makes it as difficult as possible to actually utilize those resources. Flurry knows he'll be behind on the value game, but he's just trying to close out the game ASAP. And with the 3 mana devolving missiles, it's going to be a pain for Posesi.
You can work some pretty cute tricks though here, right? With Penflinger into, yeah, I guess the 3-2. And then stab in. Devolving missiles to get Penflinger back to hand.
Correct. Or go about it this way.
Okay, okay, sure.
Back into hand. Double thing. I love it.
Pretty clean, right?
So take the DT, and then he can just get rid of this Death Rattle minion, which would have buffed the Battlefiend if he went for it the other way.
Oh, it's a good turn from Posesi. It's what you're looking to do, and he has the refill from Secret Passage, so he's not starved for value anymore. But on the other side, from Flurry, look at this turn, or coming up in the future, whether it be this turn or next turn. But like questing Wand Thief, double Vendetta, Cult Neophyte, that seems insane on this turn.
It truly, truly does. I don't even think he has enough targets for the stuff that he wants to remove. I think he would rather step the black back. Oh, Arcane Explosion.
Well,
actually, Potion, but next turn, right?
Pretty nuts, yeah. He's running low on value, and he can go Stunner on the Assassin this turn to get it back to hand. Clear everything off anyway with the Vendettas, and then Potion to get more value next turn. I love this.
Extremely powerful. Doesn't even need to use Vendetta with this line.
Sure, yeah.
You can think about using it because the questing is in range of Eviscerate Dagger here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not active anyway because Potion is a rogue spell, sadly, that he picked there, which is the downside of going for Potion. But next turn, being able to replay the Wand Thief should almost certainly activate the Vendettas.
He needs to think about what Flurry's secrets are. The package is double plagiarize, double dirty tricks, no ambush. So definitely plagiarize will be on his mind. Wants to give the minimal amount of resources. Why I believe we're seeing the Penflinger get held back here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a play around plagiarize. This is the thinking for him here, because next turn, I have to imagine it's going to be a Penflinger prep passage, try and find Edwin turn, and get a huge board presence in play at the same time.
Very reaching for the ambush immediately, but I'm definitely looking at Cult Neophyte Potion turn instead.
Same. He knows for a fact what the secret is, obviously. But that's not a big deal, right? Because he can just generate a free Vendetta with the Wand Thief. Or Eviscerate, you know, multiple ways to clear it off.
Yep, I like that. Flurry took a double take there. I think this is the superior line. He'll end up so far ahead on board with these little minions that Rogue has historically had trouble dealing with. And he gets so much spell disruption as well with the Cult Neophyte.
Probably looking at Rolling Fireball, does a similar thing for cheaper. Oh, okay. Instead going with getting the secret from his deck, I suppose. I always forget that in Rogue it's actually a playable card. I just ignore it most of the time in Mage.
Indeed. Yeah, Flurry, I don't think he wanted anything reactive just because he's sitting on second Vendetta Eviscerate. He just wants to close out the game as soon as possible. So at the very least, Ancient Mysteries is cycle.
A place to hide.
Oh, this is miserable from Posesi. The Neophyte's just shutting down Secret Passage, which is gonna get nerfed soon.
That's true, yeah, down to only 4 cards. And we've seen this game why it is maybe a little bit too powerful with Flurry having an insane Secret Passage turn earlier. I think the interesting talking point here, though, for Flurry was his decision to go double Neophyte, whereas he could have saved it to have 2 medium turns where he disrupts the spells a little bit, as opposed to 1 turn where he goes all in. Because now the downside is he has no Neophytes left, unless he wants to stunner his own guy, I suppose. And then afterwards, it's a turn for Posesi to try and wrestle things back. He has no mana disruption, and it has to go all in for him on this turn now.
Flurry also holding back on the dirty tricks as a guaranteed proc with the stunner that he's held back. You brought up a great point about the all-in from Flurry there, which now feels a little bit contradictory to this turn where he's actually saving resources. But I don't blame Flurry for going, just spending all of his mana there and just hoping that the very low health total he could get Posesi down to would be enough over a couple.
Well,
big turn for Posesi.
Yeah, you can't afford to care about anything anymore. You know, plagiarize, ambush, whatever it may be. This is the turn. You've got to go in, and it has to get the job done.
Well, you care a little bit, because if you get the stunner, then Flurry for sure can just stun back to questing.
That's true.
And this Frostbolt can for sure be played onto the questing. It's very complicated here, almost Illusia levels.
Yeah, so do you go like... I mean, I guess he wants to go Jandice, Prep.
Jandice, Prep to this.
Yeah. Ooh.
But he also doesn't want to play Shadow Step because Flurry can step his own stunner to deal with questing. But I guess if you have an 8/8 on top of that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think to be perfectly honest, when the rope is burning, it was just a question of I need to play everything as soon as is humanly possible or I will die. And he didn't manage to get everything done in the end anyway. So the poison will live to see another day.
It's actually perfect because he played 5 cards before the Shadow Step, so Flurry doesn't actually get it in hand.
Ah, right, okay.
Cone of Cold. That can hit the Wasteland Assassin, if that's even
pretty
relevant for Flurry now. I believe the Jandice also generated Totem Goliath, which is getting buffed next week.
It is. That will soon be +1 attack and -1 overload. A huge buff to Totem Goliath.
You fell right into my trap.
Give me a quest.
I believe Flurry is 1 off lethal at the moment.
Yeah, so he's just mopping everything up.
Could have seen him go for that funny line of stunning your own one thief to try and find lethal, but I think it's absolutely unnecessary here. You can just set up pretty much guaranteed for the next turn.
Yeah, gets his Reborn Edwin, Reborn Wand Thief, and it's all just spelling doom for Posesi. If he can get himself Backstab or any 0 mana spell, he could generate Puzzle Box, I guess is the best thing he could get here from Wand Thief in order to try and take the win.
Oh, he's overloaded.
Oh, he's overloaded anyway. No, wait, it was the Frostbolt that he just played. So he could have gone there for Puzzle Box. I'm just saying.
Yes, I mean, you stole my line, Dara.
You fell right into
Sorry, I'll get my own
trap.
thing.
That was weird. The mana got spent before the spell was played.
Yep, looking for Nova, looking for any way at all to try and stall this board presence, but none of these are going to be enough. Flurry, after losing the first game of the series, is able to turn things around 2-1 in advantage of Posesi, and it would be a great way for Flurry to get this season started, because despite going
absolutely.
to yet a
around despite that Druid dropping a game at the beginning. I think Flurry's in a great spot now. He only has to win with his own Mage versus Rogue and against Tempo Mage. I think those even against the Rogue matchup, it feels roughly 50-50 to me when I play it out. And of course, in the mirror, that is going to be very close to a coin flip itself. So Flurry is in a great spot.
Indeed, yeah, looking very good. I think it would be a nice turnaround as well for Flurry. It was a pretty miserable season towards the end. They're very, very close to relegation at the end, along with his teammate Dawn, both of them performing pretty poorly in Cloud9 for the last season, but looking a lot stronger here, even despite being in Division B. And I think we can expect good things from the C9 boys here in APAC Grandmasters this season. And the last deck that he needs to take a win with here is, I believe, now the Mage as his last remaining archetype, which I think can take down anything the best of times.
And this is the somewhat newer technology of Mage, which is including the double violet spell wings, which were in the initial list and then got cut out, and now people are running it again. The newly popularized list by Orange with the dragons and arcane breath is run by Posesi. Flurry's is still looking a little bit more on the regular.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of one makers. I've got to say, I think they suit the deck so beautifully. Obviously, pretty much every mage one-cost spell, even the side quests, is very powerful in this deck. But the real pièce de resistance, the reason why you're playing it for the most part, is evocation. Being able to generate extra copies of that card is so powerful. It's unbelievable.
But no matter what the new tricks are, the center of the deck is still Sorcerer's Apprentice, as we're seeing right now. Posesi going in this early is actually a bit of a surprise to me. I was expecting just Cram Session here. But he did have the second one in hand, so that's the reason to play out the first, and sometimes it doesn't get answered.
Yeah, I think the thinking is he wanted to, of course, play the Primordial Studies before the Cram Session to try and get him 2, maybe more draws, depending on the amount of spell damage the minion he generates has. And it's just tempo as well. You know, it doesn't always get cleared on the other side of the board, and if it doesn't, it becomes quite ludicrously powerful in response.
He does still end up with the lab partner surviving because the apprentice was the priority target there. Rast to follow up was potentially scary, but Flurry had an answer there with the Firebrand. Where things get a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a double giant hand, right? At which point your first concern should always be, how can I get these down as soon as possible? Especially with a Conjurer's Calling in hand. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to pop up with Apprentice as soon as possible. This could very well just be a Raz turn here instead.
Or the Coin Giant. I
or just
actually
Coin Giant.
did not see this line immediately. I keep forgetting Coin is a card that does not start in your deck, so it cheapens the Giant. I think it's fine for Posesi to play it here. If it gets answered, it likely takes a lot of Flurry's resources to do so. And if it doesn't, you just pop off with...
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult, actually, to clear it off here, especially given that, again, Flurry is playing the list that has cut quite a few of the cheap spells. You know, there's no Brain Freeze in there that was being run at the start, 1 Devolving Missiles, and even then, it still goes to a 5-drop if that happens. It's fairly powerful, to say the least. And now, Posesi, with his aggressive line, tempoing out the Apprentice, tempoing out the Giant, I suppose if you can call it that as a 5-mana 8/8, is going to be rewarded, because Conjurer's Calling ready to come down is mahoosive.
Or are you just debating whether he wants to play the magic trick here, just saving it for an apprentice turn instead, and also this Firebrand makes a lot of sense, but it's gonna get so scary now. Even draws Ray of Frost to lock out the Firebrand attack. Ooh, Natalie is not the greatest though.
Okay, 4 mana summon an 8/1 minion is not the worst thing ever, but definitely not the game-winning turn that I think it was usually being set up to be.
Yeah, that is probably a bailout for Flurry.
Whoa, but now, all of a sudden, for Posesi, next turn, if he goes for Magic Trick here, as I think you'd probably go for, Apprentice, Magic Trick, Ray of Frost, it's very possibly just going to be a giant Conjuring turn with a 0-mana giant from hand next turn.
Definitely seems that way. There was some argument for Primordial Studies because of Raz, but I do think that the hand leans more towards the giant synergy instead, so I agree with the Magic Trick pick. Flurry with a giant of his own and an apprentice of his own, but knows there's second conch in hand, so he's going to prioritize dealing with everything.
Yeah, I can respect this. Blizzard looks a little bit weak because he knows that the second copy of Conjurer's Calling is in hand in order to just re-summon the giant yet again as a couple of 8-drops.
So, depending on where the Firebrand shots go, does Arcane Explosion ever turn this into a full board clear? I don't think it would have, even if he got the perfect shot.
Yeah, I think maybe in like the absolute perfect scenario where they like almost all hit the giant, it was possible, but you don't play to that at all. It would have been a freak of statistics.
Well, I think it's go time for Posesi.
Definitely what I'm looking at.
But if he's starting with this attack, it looks like it's not the Sork turn at all. Oh my god, Walking Fountain! Flurry, get out of Posesi's game.
Yeah, that's a little bit more like it. You know, you definitely don't want the Natalie, but you definitely do want the Walking Fountain. And even Proto Drake is insane.
Okay, Flurry is not out of it yet. He has Devolving Mist. Okay, Evocation. He can get his own mana giant down very likely this turn.
Oh, okay. Bran is obviously terrible. You can just freeze the beast with any generated freezes.
Indeed.
This is salvageable.
Yeah, that's a very expensive spell damage minion, but that's not going to be the play for this turn very likely. Oh my god, these are also cheap! He got Conj! He got Conj, Derek!
Okay, so we can go Giant Conj on this turn.
Yup. Disgusting.
Oh my god, this is disgusting!
Posesi, get out of Flurry's game! Yup.
Yep.
This order, look for your own Walking Fountain, alright?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
What is even happening here?
Oh my god, more stuff, more stuff.
A little bit short of being able to play the Cyclone, but no complaints here whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably supposed to stop there for the Cyclone next turn, but I guess at this point it just doesn't matter with all the 8-drops that you have available with Conjurer's Calling yet again. But now, on the other side, this has to be the turn, right, for Posesi. You go Apprentice, and then you just go.
Yeah, what's the second step? Is it Firebrand, or is it Tricked? Probably
I think
Firebrand is not doing very much on this board, so...
Yeah, for 3 mana it's way too tame in my opinion. However, triple Magic Trick is pretty disgusting as well. If that can get him Evocation, I suppose, could be very powerful.
A single Ray of Frost could be huge to just stall this out and play down your own giants.
Mana Giant from Font of Power? Evocation?
Wait, that was a discovered giant. You're right. Oh my god.
Yeah. So you go Evocation, Ray of Frost.
Just play both giants if you can.
Oh, he doesn't have enough mana.
Okay, but these partners are generated, so he can just freeze the 2 big ones, put down the mana giants. Oh my god.
He's drawing a million cards instead. What is even happening this game?
Just insane mage things, both sides. Holy Lord. Okay, I think Flurry is still in a great spot though, because with this Blizzard and his own mana cycle for refill, Posesi's next turns are looking very weak. He's out of spells. Oh.
Okay. Pretty good. Good enough, I think, for the moment. and it's all just stopped for Posesi on his side of the board.
Mastery takes dedication.
Doesn't even have an answer for this apprentice. Outside of the Raz King. I was looking at Jandas for this turn just to get it on board, but yeah, apprentice was definitely too scary to leave up.
I mean, the only annoying thing now for Flurry really is like board space concerns, right?
I think we're not gonna see the Tricaster come down here. I was thinking it's just
Yeah.
Metacycle. Fireball. Is this just lethal?
Is that
now?
lethal?
Should be very
can't-
close.
Yeah, can't hide the things to count there, but I think that should probably wrap things up in, I think, a taste of what we can expect to come in this season if nothing changes with Mage, because that was an absolutely bananas game of Hearthstone.
On both sides, it went back and forth, and Posesi, despite him being the first one to absolutely pop off, I think the fact that Flurry managed to hold on to a freeze on the turn that he went for the board development made all of the difference there, and Flurry takes a well-deserved 3-1 win there. I will say it was looking a little shaky in the first game, but after that, it seems like Flurry was absolutely on point.
Yeah, I think he turned it around admirably. The Mage and the Rogue looking very, very strong for him. Perfectly demonstrating for me there why I like the kind of build that Flurry is going for. Whether or not you include the Spellkins, I think is a little bit more debatable. I'm still personally, for the moment at least, on favor of including those. Because we just saw what Evocation did, right? Any opportunity to generate extra ones of those sounds like a primo opportunity to me, and does end up with the freeze and the generation, the Conjurer's Callings, taking a win there. So it's the first, first win of the week on the board for Flurry. All of our players, or at least the majority of them each week, will be playing 2 matches. Up to, with over the total of the 4 weeks, up to 14 matches, I believe, altogether, playing everyone else in their group twice. So it's a good way to get things going for Flurry for sure. And a far cry from what we saw from Posesi last season, obviously finishing along with the other Japanese players in Glory and Alutemu right up at the top of Division A. And already last week down to Division B, losing his first match of the week here. It has to start playing with your mental a little bit, I think.
For sure. Posesi, out of all the 16 players in APAC, I feel like has been under the most stress just because of the way the tiebreakers shook out last week. And to start off the Division B run with a loss will definitely be a lot of pressure on him. But I do believe that Posesi has the chops to pull it back. He's got a lot more games to play out, so I expect to see good things in the future.
I do indeed. But one player that I also expected to see very, very good things from, which hasn't necessarily